Welcome to Healing Highs with Lara, where we talk about the highlights and serendipitous moments of our healing journeys. I'm your host, Lara, an international energy healer for animals and humans. Thank you for being here. I love sharing these stories with you. Welcome back. We have Faith Streng here again, third generation spiritual healer. If you missed our first episode together, go back and watch that. But we both love fairies. Yes. I don't know how else, it's to the point. We love fairies, and you work with fairies. Mm-hmm. You've done a lot of things with fairies. I've loved watching all of it because my whole life it's just been, I love fairies. I loved finding little spots as a kid that I thought fairies lived in, all the things. So I was like, let's talk about fairies with Faith.
Yes.
This episode is called Fairies with Faith.
Yes! That's so perfect.
What are your experiences that maybe your first experience or significant one of working with the fairies, being in wonder of the fairies, anything?
I think it started when my husband brought back a fairy door from Scotland. And it was the cutest thing I'd ever seen. And after that, it was pretty soon after that, I thought, we need some twinkle lights up in here. And we had some twinkle lights around a little tree we had. We put some others up, and then I realized after I kind of opened this door that that's a textbook sign that the fairies told me to put twinkle lights up because they love twinkle lights. And I ended up reading Ted Andrews' book, Enchantment of the Fairy Realm. I love Ted Andrews' book, Animals Speak Forever, and he has such a wide range of knowledge. And I loved reading that book, and that really opened up the door for me even more, realizing that I had been working with fairies my whole life and not even realizing it. And so then I just kind of started to talk about it online a little bit, and I could not believe how excited people were when I would go on a hike and say, oh, here's some different natural places. Yes. When you see these are places you know that there's fairies. And now I see this boom in fairy fiction, which I say there's no question that this is a manifestation of a collective desire to remember these connections that humans have had with not just fairies, but all creatures of the elemental realm for thousands of years. Yeah. And as we are going through this massive awakening at this time, part of it is this reconnection with the earth as a sentient being and these other creatures who live in higher dimensions that most of us can't see with our eyes or hear with our ears, but as we tune into the subtle energies, we are able to receive them. And they want to work with humans because as you are vibrating in higher dimensions, there's nothing dense there. There's no ill will there. I've had conversations with other healers who are convinced that, some fairies are mean or are trying to be confusing or make things difficult for you. I'm like, listen, they can be mischievous. Yeah. But most of the time it's just to poke you into getting a little bit lighter.
Yes, exactly.
Because as you're vibrating in these higher dimensions, you can't be mean. You can't be cruel at all.
Yes.
And so now I have multiple fairy doors in my home, and I've done different meditations to connect with the fairies. I did one a couple weeks ago that was working with the fairies specifically to help balance the chakras. And I had a couple different clients who came who said, I was able to go deeper into my energetic body than I've ever been able to go before because they helped to create a safer space for me to go even deeper within myself, which is what they do.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Do you find also the component, because fairies and children, right? There's just so much synchronicity there that they work in harmony. Do you find also that there's this way of working with the fairies that reminds us of our child self and the purity of who we are? And
absolutely.
Yeah.
Wherever there are children playing, there's always fairies
Yes,
around.
yes.
We know children maintain that sort of connection to source, to what came before, up until, probably like 7, 8, 9, 10 is kind of when it starts to dissolve for most children, unless it's actively nurtured by their parents. And working with fairies absolutely can help us with our own inner child healing, which is directly connected to our intuition, our ability to manifest, how safe we feel in our bodies, because their energy is so joyful and it is so playful. And you don't have to be able to feel them consciously or in your body. If you have a genuine offering with reverence, they are there for you. And inviting them into your meditation practice or an intuitive writing practice will absolutely help you to remember that innocent child that we all actually are.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. I always see that kind of energy and working with fairies, and when they come into a session or something, and it's like really this reminding your essence of who you are and what needs to be shifted to help that come out more and be like in alignment with your like pureness, your creativity, your joy, your silliness, all that. Yeah. When you work with fairies, people are always like, I want to see fairies, right? Like, I want to see what they look like, where do you see them and where, and that's why I loved when you would like show, these can be where you can feel them and, kind of talking more like, yeah, maybe you will see them, but it's also just like, when you feel that difference, that change of energy. What do you like to use or guide your clients to use to help them access that? Like, is there any crystals or herbs or anything that you like to also bring into the practice of connecting with the fairies?
I think the number one thing I always say is to just get outside. Everything is easier when you're outside in a natural setting, but you don't even have to be in a wooded area. You can be in an urban setting. And focusing on the feeling for most people is the most important access. I used to feel the same way about a unicorn. I was like, I just want to see a unicorn. But then when I would instead focus on how do I feel when I think about unicorn, right? And when I started focusing on my clairsentience, my clear feeling, that's when my clairvoyance and my clairaudience really started to open up too. So now when I see things here, I know that that's real.
Totally.
I was teaching a class on elementals, working with elementals and aligning with abundance. And I went for a walk before the class, and I'd been thinking about what I was going to do. And this is when I was living in North Hollywood. It was very urban. And as I was just walking on the sidewalk, I was like, wow, these plants are just so bright. Wow, everything's just so green. And I just started to notice all these cute little things as I was on this walk. And I realized it was because I was attuned to this elemental realm that everything looks so beautiful. There are almost always fairies around flowers. There are almost always fairies around trees. And so as you just bring your awareness and just soften it, and especially leaving out offerings, that really helps. And sometimes it can just be as simple as pouring out a little bit of water, right? That creates that reciprocal energy exchange, which they absolutely appreciate. And so I think that wherever you can get in nature, and there are certain spaces and environments where fairies are more likely to be found, but just go wherever you can, if it's a park, if it's your yard, and just allow your mind to be soft, invite them in, maybe leave out a little offering for them, and then just be open to receive.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
I love that. Have you heard people talk about like the portals of fairies and seeing portals, and then hearing like how you should approach the portal? I've heard like so many different points of view. For anything, it's going to be that way, but some people are like, don't go near the portal, other people are like, you could go near the portal, but do an offering, like there's these like certain ways. I'm not always one for like, there has to be these certain rules to the, it's all love,
Right.
but like, yeah, have you heard anything like that? What is your opinion of like portals or the space that they're in and approaching it?
I guess I actually haven't heard too much about that,
Isn't
but
that
I
weird?
know they're out there,
Yeah.
and I feel the same way as you. It's intuitive. If your heart is open, then everything's going to be fine. There's no hard and fast rules when working with fairies. I've certainly walked by places like certain groves of trees in the middle of nowhere. You're like, oh, there's some
Yeah,
shit over here.
for sure.
And I think because we live in the society we live in, it's not like back in the day when people would get lost in the fairy realm
Totally.
for a while
Yeah.
before they would come. That doesn't really happen anymore
Yeah.
because we are living in the circumstances that we're living in.
Mm-hmm.
But so I think if you want to walk into what you believe is a portal, what I'm hearing is the most important thing is to have an intention for it.
Yeah.
And just, it has to be something positive. And because if your heart is not pure, or if you're trying to do something from greed, etc., then nothing's really going to happen for you, or something may, that's powerful energy, so it might get twisted.
Yeah.
So I think leaving an honoring or an offering is great, but I think having a very clear reason on why you want to walk through that space is going to amplify and allow whatever that experience or energy is going to be for you to be harnessed in the most beneficial way.
Yeah. I love that earlier when you were talking about the doors, and that was your kind of, we used to have a fairy door in our place. And then when our cat that we had at the time was crossing, they were kind of hanging out in the bathroom a lot. And that was like their safe little area. And I just was like, I need to somehow support, the ways that we do, but it felt different. And so I actually went and got the fairy door and put it near them. Like, I just felt like the energy needed to be there for him to feel them coming in when we weren't home. And so then when we helped him cross, I would look over there, a lot to be like, are you okay? And it all of a sudden it felt so empty, and I was like, oh, he's not there. Okay. And it made me so sad. And so I put the fairy door back there because it brought like a shift to the energy, like, oh, you are still there, and there it's still there. And I literally left it in the bathroom for 7 years. And I know when like people come over and be like, why is there a fairy door in your bathroom?
Right.
Like, or what is that door in your bathroom?
Right.
And then you're like, fairy door, and like explain the whole thing. But yeah, it was such a funny place to have it, but it was so meaningful for me, and it brought so much peace and a shift of that little corner from like a sadness, loss, to playful, positive, bright and twinkly, like you said, in this little corner of the bathroom. So when you said that about the doors, I was like, that's right. That was like, really a sweet time. What's like one of like a funny maybe experience you've had with fairies, or like, because they are just like, their sense of humor is.
Yeah, they do have a sense of humor.
Yeah.
Well, I was always under the impression that when I would leave out offerings for them, I like to leave out food. And one time, Charles, my husband, we got a giant bag of organic pecans from Costco.
Okay.
And we got home, and I was like, babe, I'm really sorry, but these are only for the fairies. And he was like, that's a really big bag of pecans. And he's totally on board with all of it. He's amazing.
Yeah, he's great.
We love Charles.
Yeah.
But I was like, they just told me like this is specifically for them. And he was like, okay.
He's like, gotta go back and get my own.
I gotta go back and get my own pecans. And then, so normally I try to leave out, if I'm leaving out food, nuts, seeds, organic chocolate, dried fruit. And they will always tell me what they want. Like I'll open my cupboards and be like, all right, what do you want? I'm feeling like you want an offering. And every time I leave an offering, it totally increases the energy in the home. But one time, as kind of a joke, kind of not a joke, Charles bought pumpkin spice Cheerios.
What? I've never even heard of this.
Yeah, obviously it's a seasonal thing. I don't know if they'll ever be made again. And they were in the cupboard, and I was like, okay, fairies, what do you want? And they just stopped on the pumpkin spice Cheerios. And I went, those
Really?
are not organic fairies. And they were like, we don't care, we just want some. And I said, okay. So I poured them out a little dish of pumpkin spice Cheerios, and they were very receptive. They were very happy.
That's hilarious. I've never even heard of that. Yeah, and I could totally see that being something they'd be like, we want to try that. Like,
Right.
give us that.
Yeah.
Like, and you're like, it's not organic, you know. They're like, yeah. Anyways, we want to try
Which
that.
is such a good thing for us to hear too, you know, like we do our best, we eat clean,
Right.
but it's like you get to have
Sometimes
fucking
you just-
pumpkin spice Cheerios
Yeah.
or whatever your equivalent is.
Have the thing.
Yes,
Yeah, like,
and enjoy it and appreciate it.
Yeah.
And yeah.
I love that so much. That's amazing. I don't know why this is coming into my brain. I just remembered this. Did you ever see Pan's Labyrinth?
I don't know if I ever actually saw the whole movie.
It's pretty gory.
Right.
But the whole idea is that this little girl is being guided by mythical creatures to remember who she is in this like very dark environment on Earth. And one of the things is that there's fairies that guide her. And I remember when I saw it, I like flew out of my seat because it felt like how they created that fairy on the screen felt so like, it just hit me like, that's a fairy, you know, like I just was like, that's it, that's a fairy. Like it hit me so hard. And who I was watching it with, they're like, what happened? And I was like, that's a fairy, and they're like, yeah, like, it's obvious it's a fairy. I'm like, no, you're not, okay. And I was just trying to like watch the movie, but in my brain, I was just thinking the whole time, like, it felt so legitimately, like they hired an actor fairy to be in this movie. And I watched that movie so many times purely because of that energy and the way that they depicted it. And it's a great movie anyways. I think it won some awards, but and the concept of the movie is really good for us as humans, like in remembering who we are and where we come from. But that specifically, the fairy thing, like kept driving me, you know.
That's Guillermo del Toro, right?
Yes, that's what it was. I was trying to remember. I was like, del Toro.
Right. And it's so clear that, I mean, his brain is so incredible, but you can see that there were clearly fairies influencing the creation of that. And they have, as the consciousness of humans have raised, they've been like, okay, we can come back out and we can start allowing ourselves to be channeled through authors like Sarah J. Maas, through Guillermo del Toro, you know, through me, through you.
Artists,
and people are hungry for it. So I love that hit you so hard. It's like, that was legit fairy influence.
Yeah, like they're
100%.
like, it's like undeniable, totally recognizable. Yeah, and the person I was with there, it's not their area. They're not in this world. And yeah, they were like, what's that? And so I had to just like rein it in. Like, and then I was like, I need to see this movie again.
Yeah, by myself.
Yes, by myself so I can freak out. And I was just like studying the whole thing. Like, yeah, it's like you hear about dinosaurs your whole life. And then if you were to actually like go and be transported and see a dinosaur, you're like, can you hold still for a second? I just need to look at you. Yeah.
How do you experience fairy energy? Do you feel it? Do you see them? Do you hear them? Do you just know them?
Yeah, it's a lot of feeling, but I notice like I see them not in full like presentation. Their energy's so fast, you know? So it's a lot when, yes, you're in some, whether it is nature or you're around plants or something, it's a very like if they hopped across the leaves really fast, like, and you just see this like ripple of movement, or nothing's moving, and then like this little flower is moving, and then you're like, what? Oh,
there's no wind.
You're
Why is that flower moving?
Nothing else is moving, but this tiny little flower is moving. It's those times that I feel like I'll catch a glimpse of movement or a shadow or a like tuck behind something. But yeah, it's mostly a feeling of their energy and their joy and playfulness and humor and really funny. Like when people talk about their mischievous, but it is to make you laugh and get you lighthearted. So it's often like something will happen and you're like, oh, where did that go? I just had that thing. And then you turn around, but now it's back.
Right.
And you're like, okay, fairies, like, you got it.
I see you, okay. Or when you can't find your keys for the life of you, you know, there's an opportunity for you to get really mad about it, or you can say, okay, fairy babies,
Yes.
like, okay, I'm getting it. I'm slowing down. I am laughing at myself. I'm not taking myself so seriously. Okay, I get it. I get it.
Yeah.
I always hear laughter whenever they're around, and I'll just get I'll just know.
It's them.
When I did a retreat in Sedona, this past summer, and we did a guided fairy walk. So I had this whole, and that was we had people who were there for the whole time, and then we just had people who came for the day. So we had a really big group of people on that day, and I just led people on this trail, and I said, okay, do you feel something over here? This is what I feel over here. I feel this fairy. This is the color I feel. This is the feeling I feel. And I went through, and everybody's faces were just so lit up. And then I let people go off on their own and experience. And when everybody came back together, it was so cool to see every single person had a really meaningful connection with a fairy energy. And I had never shared that in person with that many people before. And that was just so inspiring for me. And as people are starting to connect with fairies, I always say that the imagination is how intuition is made manifest. So it's like when I did this other retreat in Ireland, and we were at Hill of Tara, which is like famous. I mean, most fairies I've like ever been around.
I was going to ask you about that. Like, so what about there?
So intense. And I was just like, to your experience, I was seeing them and feeling them all over the place. And it would have been very easy for me to be like, oh, it's just my imagination.
Right.
I've heard this is a really hot spot for fairies.
Right.
But I know at this point that I know that it's not nothing. It's not fanciful. Like I am tuned in with the energy of this place, and I trust it.
Yeah.
And it is that feeling of trust that you just have to allow and be in the receiving, and whatever glimpses come through, or you see a little thing of movement or a little sparkle out of the corner of your eye, whatever it may be, or even just a sudden feeling that you have when you see this mushroom ring. That's definite evidence of fairy activity. And you're just learning to go, all right, what happens if I lean in and I just say yes? And I just allow myself to follow the joy of belief.
Yeah.
Right?
Absolutely.
And it's just fun.
It's just so fun.
It's just so fun.
It was really my first, I think, way that I connected with people in healing was through like fairy oracle cards. Because as I was like figuring out that I had these abilities, and these aren't like, oh, I thought everyone had like was doing this, and maybe it is a general experience. Then I was gifted these fairy oracle cards, and then my friends would be like, do them for us, like little readings. And it was a nice, very gentle, happy, positive way to lean into exploring more of what I'm doing and how I'm doing it, and connecting with people and doing it, and getting into their energy. And it just felt so safe and joyful, which on this podcast, it's, we could talk, of course, about like we said in the last episode, like the shadow work, it's so important. But I also want to be a source of support and lightness and silliness and joy. And so I think it makes sense for me that was a kind of opening of like, just play with these cards and connect with people. And then all my friends being like, do it for us. Come on Saturday, we'll have a slumber party and you can do all of us, like, I'm like, okay, just like, what's happening? And looking back at that now, I'm still friends with somebody from then. And she's like, yeah, like, I'm not surprised like at your life, because we saw it then. And all I'm thinking is like, just like talking to fairies, playing with fairies, and it was like so joyful and positive. So it was a nice way for me to be like, you can come into this world, and there's support here for you. And it is playful, and that's like something that you really love. So that was something too that I feel like is a good guide as well, that you're feeling like good doing something, so you keep doing it.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah. And to your point, as you are doing that shadow work stuff too, like you got to have a break. You know, you got to know when to like put the shadow work down and go outside and talk to some fairies.
Yeah.
And knowing that they can hold you, you know, as you are doing that, you know, whether it's fairies or your ancestors or your guides or whoever, you know, I think that when you're going to those deeper parts, it's important to know, all right, it's not just me, like I have this whole like team around me who will also be here when I'm ready to like exit the space and go just do something fun for a little bit.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I call them into like any, you know, you call in like angels, ancestors, spirit team. I'm like, you're fairies. I mean, you could list so many things. So sometimes I'm like, all of them.
Just all of them.
But they're there.
Right. Yeah.
Is there any other thing that you really want to like share about fairies?
Well, you know, I'm not offering it right now, but in the past I have offered past life fairy readings.
Right, that's why,
Where those were like shorter sessions that were opportunities for people to see their past life experiences, and not just on Earth, but in other places where they either worked with fairies or, you know, were fairies. And that always revealed really juicy stuff for people. So it really reinforces the strong connection that people may feel to fairies or the fairy world, and showing how you have worked with their magic before. It was just so much fun. So if you are called to fairies, like this is not the only time that you have been working with them. There's for sure other lifetimes and probably other dimensions that you have worked with them as well.
Yeah, very true. Actually, that made me just think of something else. I don't even know if it's related, but it brought in something else. I feel like right now on the planet, as the children that are being born are, of course, a different type of energy, I feel a lot of children that were fairies coming through. And like you said, the consciousness has changed. It's more in our field. We're seeing it more. People are talking about it more. But I also feel like there's children that are like babies right now that I'm like, whoa, you know, like, hello.
See your wings.
Like, you know, like, and then watching them grow and wanting to be around fairies and talking to fairies and doing all the things on their own, or someone supporting that anyways, like, because they can sense it in some way. I don't know if you've tapped into anything like that, or has that come up?
That has not come up for me before, but I'm getting a very big yes. I mean, I'm certainly aware of, you know, these higher frequency crystal children and rainbow children, and that makes absolute sense to me. And I'm just getting like, yes, girl, like 100%. These are also fairy children who are just coming in. And when you see those kinds of circumstances following, like, oh, they're just naturally being supported in this, or they're just naturally leaning towards it, you go, okay, it is. Yeah, it is.
No one else has talked about this, but they're doing it. You know,
Right. Yeah.
Amazing. That was so fun. Thank you for talking about fairies with me.
Any freaking time.
Right.
Any freaking time.
This episode is sponsored by Provia Psychology. At Provia Psychology, we believe healing is a whole person journey. Our compassionate mental health therapists offer personalized care that honors your unique path, blending evidence-based therapy with deep intuitive understanding. With offices in Long Beach and Newport Beach and secure telehealth across California, support is always within reach. Visit proviapsychology.com to find a therapist who aligns with you. Provia Psychology, healing starts here. The void I was talking about this and saying, I want to talk about fairies with her, and they were saying, like, didn't you already talk about? I'm like, no, I've never talked about fairies. I need to talk about fairies, like, and it's with her. So if you are interested in connecting with Faith about anything, please watch our previous episode, and also we'll have her information in the bio so you can connect with her about fairies or anything else. But again, thank you for this time. I appreciate you so much.
Thank you so much. It's super fun. The fairies are very happy.
I know, right? They're like, yes, we're in there. So thank you so much, healer. And I wish you joy and serendipity on your healing journey. And I know our paths will cross again.
Hello. Are you coming back? You forgot to ask a question. Hello. Cue the chimes.